legal, I'm down with. Maxwell joked with V Magazine that the two met on Grindr, but the pair actually had mutual friends through Cyrus's pal and personal assistant, Shane Thomas. She revealed, "It's been a trip to hang out and see a little of their world. Felt very organic and right." The Victoria's Secret angel played coy when asked if she had a significant other, saying, "Define significant." As for how their romance played out, it may have been nothing more than a fling. That same year, Cyrus told Elle that she was just having fun, saying, "I'm very open about it. I'm pansexual, but I'm not in a relationship. I'm 22, I'm going on dates, but I change my style every 2 weeks, let alone who I'm with." Miley Cyrus fans had a field day when they got news of her European vacation with Brody Jenner's ex-wife, Caitlyn Carter. The two had just separated from their respective husbands in 2019 when they decided to pack on the PDA in designer swimwear while touring around Italy. Merely hours after the steamy paparazzi photos were released, a rep had confirmed to ET that Cyrus had split from then-husband Liam Hemsworth with a statement that read, "Ever evolving, changing as partners and individuals, they have decided this is what's best while they both focus on themselves and careers." What better way to evolve than traveling around Europe with a smoking hot new girlfriend? The two got hot and heavy fast, but the pair only lasted 2 months before ultimately calling it quits in August 2019. The relationship was Carter's first experience with a woman, and clearly, it was special to her. She wrote for Elle, "I went on vacation with a female friend. The next thing I knew, I was in love with her. Although the relationship with my friend was often referenced in the media as merely a summer fling or a same-sex affair, it was so much more than that. This was a profound journey of self-discovery." Cyrus also made bold revelations on the Call Her Daddy podcast, where she shared,
"I've been in love 3 times. One person who is a girl that I still think about and like dream about all the time."
Cody Simpson and Miley Cyrus began dating in October 2019. According to Billboard, the two even spent COVID quarantine together, with Simpson taking care of his girlfriend when she had vocal cord surgery. They seemed as happy as ever, posting countless lovey-dovey Instagram pics. Cyrus was even the muse for Simpson's ballad Golden Thing, which featured lyrics like, "Diamond throne, all on her own, coffee skin, she let me in." According to People, Simpson told reporters at an event, "We just have a ball, yeah? And that's the most important part of a relationship, you know?" In August 2020, the musical pair ultimately decided that they were going in 2 different directions in life, with Simpson pursuing a professional swimming career and Cyrus focused on her music and touring. On an episode of The Kyle and Jackie O Show, the Australian musician explained,
"It's kind of a mutual decision between us, knowing that we were sort of going in different directions in our life."
The swimmer went on to qualify for the Australian Olympic trials, but finished last at the finals, vowing to return again in 3 years. Meanwhile, Cyrus finished up her 7th studio album, Plastic Hearts. As of September 2022, the Malibu singer was linked to Lily drummer Max Morando, sharing a cute snap on her Instagram alongside him at the Gucci Love Parade fashion show. Now, while all of these relationships tell the story of Cyrus as an adult, what about her very first boyfriend? For that, we have to go back decades to her childhood sweetheart. Miley Cyrus was already stealing hearts at the tender age of 8. While most kids that age were catching cooties on the playground, she was filming the TV series Doc alongside actor Tyler Posey. The early 2000s show followed Billy Ray Cyrus as a small-town doctor who starts practicing in New York City. Miley made a guest appearance in a couple of episodes as a character called Kylie, while Posey played the role of Raul Garcia, a boy later adopted by the doctor's friend. Billy Ray had moved his family from Tennessee to Canada to film the show, which ran for 4 years. On a 2016 episode of Larry King Now, the Teen Wolf star explained that Miley became his girlfriend when he was 9 years old and didn't have many pals. He added,
"She and I became really close friends, and
you kissed her.
And yeah, just once."
As for who made the first move, Posey told BuzzFeed Celeb that the 8-year-old, who was his first ever girlfriend, was anything but shy. He revealed, "She was trying to make me do a kissy face, and then she kissed me. She planted a big one right on my mouth, and I loved it. It was very awkward and very young and cute and sweet and wholesome."
got a mosquito floating around. I must get in. It's me.
Boy, oh boy, here's some news. It's already February of this newfangled 2023, and yet everyone is still talking about the movie Plane, starring Gerard Butler. That's despite much of the movie not actually taking place on a plane, but it just goes to show how much America has airline fever. Fevers, of course, being a rise in body temperature that causes us to get sick and die sometimes. Also, I'm now being told that no one is talking about the movie Plane after all. Still, it was a good entry point for today's video, which, as you probably already know from reading the title of the video, it's about airlines. Because here's some news. The recent holidays were extremely mega special terrible for air travelers. This is of course different from other holiday years when airlines were just severely mega special terrible. And so here's some question. Why exactly is air travel the worst? Even before the pandemic, or not during snow emergencies, or during any given part of the year, airlines are notorious for being some of the most insufferable businesses for consumers. Being on an airplane often feels like we're being held hostage by a faceless corporation with no guarantee that they will actually deliver us and our belongings to the correct destination and at the correct time. And imagine if any other business functioned that way. Imagine if you went to the movie theater and were jammed into the smallest seat possible and forced to wait an extra 3 hours past the show time. And when the movie started, it was completely different from what you came there for. The movie you came for, of course, being Plane, starring Gerard Butler, the film everyone is talking about. Anyway, what happened to airlines? Why are they terrible? Does it have to do with deregulation and the ails and ills of capitalism? What is, as they say, the deal, airline-wise, with it? Or, put a better way, the deal with air travel. What is it? Kind of a spoiler about deregulation at the top of the video, sorry. Barring any twists or stunts or hootenannies, this is probably going to be a pretty straightforward, maybe even nonpartisan episode. Something we can all get behind. But just because you know the destination doesn't mean you can't enjoy the ride. Unless you're riding on a plane, which sucks. And speaking of sucking on things, let's talk about the most recent debacle at the end of 2022. And while, as we alluded to, all the airlines tend to lick on poopies and suckle turds, there was a clear winner for the turdiest suckler of sucking turds at the Poopy Slurping Festival. Because while winter storms pile-drived any and all travel around Christmas, only one airline stayed firmly face down on the mat.
Southwest is really getting a lot of the criticism and the scrutiny right now since it accounts for nearly 3/4 of all the canceled flights yesterday.
Thank you. This morning, the chaos surrounding Southwest Airlines cancellations continues. Now the airline is struggling to recover.
Southwest passengers are facing another frustrating day of cancellations and delays and, well, very few answers. The airline has canceled more than 300 flights in and out of the Bay Area so far today, and it's not just getting people to the right place that's a problem. Lost luggage is piled up and baggage claims all across the country.
Tisk, tisk. That's what you get for kicking Kevin Smith off that flight. He's like the old woman in Drag Me to Hell, don't you know? Southwest was, to put it politely, a piss-slippy donkey orgy of mishaps and f***em-ups. On the 28th of December, they were...
We've only got SAA here in South Africa, and that's just dead as a state-owned enterprise. And I don't know much about the smaller national airlines.
responsible for over 90% of all national flight cancellations, which is pretty dang impressive, the same way chugging a jar of pickle brine is technically a feat. And they're also a good place to start as we creep into the larger and systemic problems with the airline industry. I would argue that what happened with Southwest is a microcosm of the bigger issue, so let's journey through that. But first, to get into the microcosm, we have to get real tiny. Warmbo, shrink ray! Simple episode, sorry. That's right. Okay, so let's try it again. But first, some of Southwest's problems do stem from one unique situation that doesn't affect other airlines. They use something called a point-to-point model that allows their passengers to fly directly between smaller cities. In other words, while most airlines use major metropolitan hubs, making stopovers in big airports before advancing passengers to their smaller nearby destinations, Southwest will take you directly from one smaller airport to another smaller airport. And while normally that's a good thing that saves a lot of time for the passengers, smaller airports aren't going to have a lot of standby crew able to step in if something goes wrong. This was the root of the logistical problems that Southwest faced. As the weather began to shut down some flights, it created a domino effect where planes were stuck in smaller metro areas that didn't have many people to fill in crew positions. The planes were also more spread out because they didn't cycle from one hub to another. And so because everything was incredibly scattered, it took Southwest far longer to get their shit back together. Shit far apart, therefore shit going back together is hard. But that's where the problems unique to Southwest end, because there were a lot of things the company could have been doing in the long term to mitigate at least some of this problem. For starters, if Southwest was going to rely on this trickier model, it would make sense for them to have a method to easily match crew members with various flights. But, of course, that would require them to invest in their computers somewhere down the line, which they didn't, as admitted by their own CEO in their apology video.
The tools we use to recover from disruption serve us well 99% of the time, but clearly we need to double down on our already existing plans to upgrade systems for these extreme circumstances so that we never again face what's happening right now.
Damn, what a gramp snack he is. This pepper-haired sex god would go on to elaborate that, quote, the process of matching up those crew members with the aircraft could not be handled by our technology, which is a very tactful way of saying that their computer system is hot, drippy garbage, as the pilots union would go.
And the train's brakes don't get checked.
On to describe in a far less tactful way, Southwest was plagued with a terrible former CEO and chairperson who purposefully underinvested in tech upgrades in favor of, quote, maximizing shareholder return. They describe a company that has had numerous operational problems due to system-wide meltdowns that was only obvious in this most recent catastrophic event. Because it turns out that all of Southwest's phone systems, computers, processors, all the little dildos that communicate with the airplanes and so on, well, none of that has really been updated since the fucking 1990s. That's 30 years ago, or right around when Passenger 57 came out, otherwise known as the plane of the 90s. Every decade gets a plane movie, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4, but there's always at least one. That's an American guarantee. Unlike knowing if your Southwest flight will actually exist once you get to the airport. By the way, that pilots union sure seems correct in their statement about shareholders, because Southwest paid out $10 billion damn dollars to their shareholders in the 5 years leading to the pandemic. Seems like they, could have used that money to, fix their product and service. But as you can imagine, airlines putting quality over the quantity in their wallets is going to be a running theme in this video, because it's not just Southwest, and it's not just this one time. For example, this headline about Southwest's and Delta's computers could have come out this week, but this is from 2016, when there were other computer crashes for multiple airlines. United had a computer failure that caused hundreds of passengers to be stuck on the runway for hours. Around the same time, Delta canceled over 1,500 flights because a single piece of equipment failed. You'd think they would learn their lesson after that, but here's another computer breakdown from Delta in 2018. The article noting it's the third crash for that specific airline. In this article about British Airways having a crash, great to see it's not just us Yanks in it. They outline the problem. That problem being that no one is updating their computer systems. They just don't want to, because that would cost money, you see. And of course, since there's only like 4 airlines, we'll get to that, one of them going down kind of ripple affects all the others. And because of multiple mergers, again, we'll get to that, several computer systems have had to mush together in ways for which they weren't prepared. Because of course, they don't all have the same software. And this is just one aspect of the hell that is airline companies. It's not just computer glitches, and it's not just a few delayed flights either. It's a fucking dystopia out there.
Her travel nightmare started Sunday afternoon. Her American Airlines flight to JFK was scheduled to take off around 1 p.m. She says passengers sat on the plane for 3 hours, then were asked to deplane, board another jet, and wait out a 2-hour storm before finally departing some 6 hours later.
I was flying from LAX to Miami, Miami to Orlando, my final destination. And for whatever reason, in Miami, after having a whole kerfuffle with no one being there to load me onto the plane and me having to wait until the plane finished boarding to actually get transferred on, they didn't put my chair on the plane, my wheelchair. They didn't put my wheelchair on the plane. So I got to Orlando and my wheelchair was not here.
This morning, a mother speaking out after she says her child was allowed to walk off an American Airlines flight alone while traveling as an unaccompanied minor.
Along with that last story about an airline losing a child, here's another story about a 10-year-old whose connecting flight was canceled without the parents being informed. Oh, and here's a story about a guy who spent 2 days without his wheelchair when Delta just forgot to put it on his flight. A lot of wheelchair stories, actually. I guess if you are in a wheelchair, you just shouldn't travel, which seems like a failed society sort of thing. According to the Department of Transportation, more than 800 wheelchairs were mishandled just in a single month. Here's a story of someone getting booted off the plane after boarding for having a supposed invalid ticket. How does that even happen? Here's a couple in their 80s who ran out of heart medication because their flight was canceled twice. Here's a dude that was told that the airline misplaced his luggage and he'd have to go get it himself 4,000 miles away from where he had landed. Here's a Delta flight that was forced to make a U-turn over the Atlantic Ocean due to a fuel imbalance, whatever the ungodly that means. And at this point, it should probably be noted that all the stories I just shared were just from American-based airlines and just from last year. Those are all from 2022. Because flying is a goddamn funhouse of terror. It really is. We sit on these little planes and hope that some surreal nightmare won't unfurl before us like a whale's dick popping out of a birthday cake. A pilot randomly pushing his political agenda, or a 6-hour delay on the runway where everyone bakes in a metal tube, or literally sitting in shit and no one caring about it. And if we speak up or freak out, we might get beaten and dragged off the plane, apparently. So what in the hell happened to this industry? As I've already pointed out, no other type of business is allowed to be this bad to their customers and still exist. The only thing close is like those weird BDSM haunted houses that make you sign a waiver. And so now that we've established that these airlines are, in fact, terrible, it's time to go back and look at how we got here and how, it probably has a lot to do with capitalism and deregulation. Again, spoilers. But before we do that, here are some ads, and I hope it's for an airline. Be ironic, you wouldn't expect it, but the juxtaposition. Hello, my cuddle bear. That's you, my big, beautiful cuddle bear you. I'm Cody, here to tell you about AG1 by Athletic Greens. It's a nutritional drink, you see. I gave AG1 a try because unlike you, a big, beautiful bear scrounging for berries and eating hikers, I don't always have time for a balanced diet. I take AG1 when I do these ads, and that's good because it helps me fill in those nutritional gaps so I can be strong, and one day I will find you, my beautiful bear who ate my entire family. Cheers!
Healthy appetite.
Yum! I will get my revenge against you, the big beautiful bear watching this ad. Your end will be by my hand. AG1 is keto and paleo and vegan, by the way. It's just a single scoop in a glass of water. Too easy! If you're looking for an easier way to take supplements, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/more news. That's athleticgreens.com/more news. Check it out, bear. What's up? What's up? Remember me? I'm Cody. I was here before you went on that incredible journey through the land of advertisements. We're all a little older now, a little wiser. Before the break, we more or less described how airlines are festering heaps of gorilla waste. But it's now time to talk about why. Why are airlines festering heaps of gorilla waste? I'm talking ape shit and piss, my friends. And that means it's time for our favorite ongoing game that we didn't have to make a graphic for just for this video. How did deregulation screw us? Oh yeah, baby, sock it to me! Get your home copies out and gather the awful little kids because we have a history lesson for you. While the first passenger airline service was in 1914, stuff didn't get real until a few decades later. In 1938, Congress created the Civil Aeronautics Administration, or CA, as the first regulatory agency for airlines. A few years later, FDR would split CA into two distinct agencies, one designed to regulate air traffic control and flight safety measures, and the other for accident investigations and economic regulation of commercial airlines. That latter group would be the Civil Aeronautics Board, or CAB. CAB did things like regulate air routes and flight frequency, anything designed to oversee the interaction between the public and the airlines. Predictably, the CAB ultimately did not have the resources to keep up with the ever-growing market of air travel. But we'll get to that in a moment, because right now, and by right now I mean from the 1950s to the 1970s, we were in the golden age of air travel. You've seen the pictures. Heck, maybe you were even alive and Don drapering around to visit your many families. Here's a taste.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are now at cruising altitude, 35,000 feet. Our flying speed is 575 miles per hour. In addition, we're benefiting from a substantial tailwind by courtesy of the jet stream. Hence, our ground speed is now approximately 658 miles per hour. Indications are that our arrival at London Airport may be ahead of schedule.
Hot damn! Except for all the racism and misogyny and probably a lot of other terrible things, that looks great. Cocktail lounges, 5-course meals, fucking ice sculptures and junk, everyone all dressed up like it's a fancy sky funeral. Why isn't it like that today? The easy answer is that airlines back then were regulated under the CAB, except that's not actually the easy answer. The actual answer to why airlines looked so fucking fabulous during this time was because they were extremely expensive to use. For example, in 1974, the minimum price for a ticket from New York City to LA, adjusted for inflation, was $1,442 minimum. That's probably why, in the 1960s, only about 20% of Americans had ever flown at all. It was a luxury item, which of course meant that it was mostly for white people. So when you see pictures of scantily clad stewardesses grinding their teeth through hours of sexual harassment to bring some bright-eyed child a tray of gelatin pork bananas or whatever, and you think, wow, that could have been me, I'm here to tell you that statistically, it couldn't have been you. Also, there were just so many skyjackings during that time because we hadn't thought to, do any security, I guess. It was not actually a good time to fly, is my point. So, cut to the late 1970s, and a congressional investigation would look into why commercial airlines were so gosh darn expensive. The answer they came up with, which was absolutely true, was that deregulation would increase competition and drive down ticket prices. You see, when I said that plane tickets had a minimum price, that's because the government mandated that price, because that ensured that both the airlines got paid and the customer was treated well. By taking the government out of it, airlines could bring down their prices to better compete with each other. And so in 1978, the Airline Deregulation Act was passed with bipartisan support and signed into law by... Oh, wow. I automatically expected to see Reagan there, since we're talking about deregulation that would ultimately degrade an American service. But I really can't stress that at the time, this was bipartisan. Also, it worked, and ticket prices almost immediately plummeted after this. However, along with deregulating the airlines, this law completely dissolved the CAB as well. And perhaps that was going a little bit too far, as evidenced by the pit of hell that currently surrounds the airline industry. Because along with giving them the ability to compete, deregulating the airlines also allowed them to start thinking about ways to make even more money than before. It also made them more susceptible to a recession, and in the early 80s, both of these problems perfectly came together like the devil's Reese's cup.
The union representing those who man America's air traffic control facilities called a strike. This was the culmination of 7 months of negotiations between the Federal Aviation Administration and the union. They are in violation of the law, and if they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated.
There he is! I was getting a little worried there for a moment. Along with affecting the airlines, Reagan's mass firing of over 11,000 striking air traffic controllers marked a very important moment for labor in this country. To quote former Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan, speaking directly about this event, his action gave weight to the legal right of private employers, previously not fully exercised, to use their own discretion to both hire and discharge workers. But more pressing to the moment, firing that many air traffic controllers really does a number on the then inflated airline industry, especially during a recession. And so company after company began to tank. Many airlines cut benefits and wages and forced more strikes that led to less business, and so on and so forth. Layoffs and mergers became the new hotness, and ultimately we lost countless brands such as Pan Am, Laker Airways, Braniff, Eastern Airlines, and of course, Trump Shuttle. In fairness, that last airline was never financially profitable on account of it being run by a bad businessman, but the rest of those companies could have survived. By the 90s, airlines had suffered huge losses, and so only the biggest airlines had any chance of making it. Some companies used this to their advantage. For example, American Airlines brought down their prices in key areas in order to drive smaller competitors out of business. They would then raise their prices back up once those companies called it quits. Clinton's DOJ actually sued the company for their predatory pricing in the late 90s and lost to the airlines due to a lack of proof. In other words, we were now balls deep in deregulation's effects. The government seemed unable to stop airlines from pushing each other around. And yet we needed airlines to survive. You know, people need to fly places. That created a situation where we couldn't regulate the airlines, but also had to bail them out so they still existed. See, that DOJ American Airlines case really sums it up. The case was ended in April of 2001, and for whatever strange reason, airline stock began to tank not long after that in late September of 2001. Not sure what's happening there. Probably has something to do with the movie Hardball coming out, and so airlines began to need bailouts from our government, and we just gave them the money despite constantly having these legal issues with them. And after a long war in the mid-2000s, presumably about the movie Hardball, people were pretty goddamn tired of the same old government hogwash. They were ready for things to, I don't know, a word for stuff not being the thing that they currently are. Who? Oh, who could help us during this time?
I'm Barack Obama.
Why, hello! Yes, we were saved! Change! Hope! Etc. We did it! Let's celebrate! Let's all f*** each other to celebrate! Wait, wait. Oh, wow. Okay, so apparently it was not the movie Hardball that led to the Iraq War, but an attack on the World Trade Center? But more importantly to this video, President Barack Obama did not, it seems, help the situation with the airlines. In fact, despite speaking out against mergers, the Obama administration oversaw 3 major airline mergers, resulting in just 4 fucking companies having control over 80% of the market. This includes a merger between American Airlines and US Airways, something his DOJ originally fought against right up until it did not. The reason for this reversal sure appears to be a very comfy relationship between airline lobbyists and Democrats, specifically at the Justice Department and within the White House at the time. I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but it appears that fucking over American consumers in exchange for bloated monopolies is a very bipartisan tradition in this country. And so with absolutely no one to help us with this ever-expanding problem, the situation just got worse and worse. A ridiculously consolidated market enabled a handful of super big companies to conspire together and maximize their profits while diminishing customer experience. This is the reason a single absolutely hellbound consultant created a brand new system of baggage fees that did not exist before the late 2000s, or why American Airlines and JetBlue were able to form an unofficial alliance in order to limit competition in the Northeast and keep their prices up. In other words, everything we originally wanted deregulation to achieve is no longer happening, because airlines have no reason to be competitive anymore. You can say some of it was out of their control because of economic turmoil and hardball, but the result is the same, and they're perfectly happy just the way they are. because everything the country has done for decades has encouraged this behavior. Remember when I said Clinton's DOJ sued an airline for predatory pricing and lost because of lack of proof? Well, that's because in 1993, the Supreme Court case, Brook Group v. Brown and Williamson Tobacco Corp., made it way harder for the government to prove predatory pricing. For that, and a bunch of other Supreme Court decisions, it's nearly impossible for regulators to go after baggage fees or airlines pushing out competition or conspiring together. And the airlines know this, which is why we're now seeing them unbundle most of their fares. No longer are they worried about making us pay more for extra legroom, overhead bin space, extra bags, rebooking, and just about everything that used to come with a standard ticket price. Because who's going to stop them? You? You're so drunk you can barely sit there. And as long as they all coordinate, they can gouge us any way they see fit. Of course, there was a brief window where it seemed like this model would no longer work. And that, of course, brings us to the era of the World Wide Web, cyberspace, the great digital frontier. You know, bleeps and bloops. And then the free porn shows up on the computer box.
Change your search without using the back button. Another way Expedia makes it easy to find the trip you're looking for.
Expedia.com. Change your search without hitting the back button, you say? It really is the future. So a quick bit about how airline pricing works today. In short, it's a basket of horny snakes. Horny, kinky snakes who want to f*** human beings. Another way to describe it is as an algorithm, because that's what it actually is. And all that algorithm does is look at the current market and determine the highest possible fare that can be charged, specifically the basic economy fare. But that isn't actually going to be what you ultimately pay, because thanks to websites like Expedia and Travelocity and Kayak and Plane Sluts, the name of the game is getting your airline on the top page of search results for affordable ticket prices. In a functioning world, that makes sense. That would just mean that airlines would have to compete in order to bring down their prices. But that's not what they're actually doing. Enter drip pricing. Drip pricing is the practice where during the process of buying something, the price of the item slowly goes up due to various fees and add-ons that are often mandatory for that thing. In other words, an airline can say that a ticket is only $200, get to the top of those search engines, and then expand that price as you journey through their hellish checkout. Most airlines known for lower costs are actually making most of their revenue through those extra fees. Half of Frontier Airlines' revenue, for example, came from fees instead of ticket sales. And if you've flown recently, you obviously know this. You click on one price, and then that price starts going up the more, big quotes, extra services you select. This is why the process of buying a ticket is designed to be complicated, and why prices and fees often fluctuate depending on the time and destination. For example, airline seats are one of the only products that get more valuable the closer they are to expiring. That's because they use a yield management system to control pricing, which is basically the act of changing pricing based on the behavior of a consumer. If someone really needs a ticket at the last minute, they will pay more for it. That's why most flights will have between 10 and 20 different prices depending on when you try to purchase your seats. To sum it up, the entire process is purposefully confusing and deceptive. The end goal being the airlines getting more money from you than if they made the process straightforward, honest, and or helpful. And in fact, according to one Harvard study, customers who choose the lower presenting price options very often end up paying way more than other expensive seeming options, thanks to this drip pricing technique. And while prices have absolutely reduced since the 1970s, it's worth pointing out that those calculations are likely based on starting prices listed by airlines and not the final prices after all the fees. And if you were to actually compare what you were getting in the 70s versus what you get now, you come to realize that prices haven't actually lowered that much. Hey, why do I feel so mad right now? Oh, right, it's because of all the things I just said. Grrr, I go. So that's everything up until the 2010s, a harrowing tale of deregulation and lobbying. all compounding in order to make airlines the worst fucking companies imaginable. And yet it still feels like we don't have a solution here. Surely there's something. What would Reagan do, you know? Oh, they will pay more. Right. So I guess let us think on this whilst cutting to some ads. Maybe it'll be an Expedia ad this time, so as to continue the irony and by extension, situational humor. BRB.
Hey, it's Rapping Katie Stoll here to tell you about Stamps.com. I'm not actually going to rap, though. It's really hard. But listen, we're already elbow deep in 2023. Don't you think you should level up your small business? Stamps.com will help you with that by letting you print your own postage and shipping labels right from your home office. You can print bulk labels in minutes, letting your business move faster than a DJ can drop a sick beat. Sick beats are my middle name, you know? You know. Seriously, I was legally born rapping Katie Sick Beats Stoll, and it's honestly been a real problem for me. I have no idea why my parents would do that to me, and I don't even know how to rap. Anyway, Stamps.com will give you great discounts on USPS and UPS shipping rates and works for any size business. So what are you waiting for? Set your business up for success when you get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code MORENEWS for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code MORENEWS. Get your business in control. Take it from me, rapping Katie Stoll. I didn't mean to make that one rhyme. Seriously, that's really not my thing. I don't want to, misrepresent myself at all.
And we're B'd right in our A's. And if you are one of them Benjamin Buttons who go backward in time or whatever, I didn't watch it. What we were talking about in your future, I guess, again, didn't see it, is that the airlines have been treated to a combination of recessions, 9/11, and massive deregulation. Also, that one time Denzel Washington flew the plane upside down, but I think that was just a movie and it's weird to even bring up, so sorry for bringing it up. This situation created a bit of a monster in that there are now just 4 major airlines in the US, and they all conspire together to do pretty much whatever they want to us, even butt stuff. It's kind of weird how they're both the victim of this story and the villain, because it seems that there's always something that causes these airlines to touch tips with bankruptcy. And while perhaps they know that and try to preemptively cut corners, I can't help but notice that their CEOs make all of the money. In the same year, they ate shit over the holidays. Southwest gave their CEO a giant pay raise. Seems like they might just be bad with their money. It's this combination of woe is me posturing with a seemingly unspoken knowledge that they won't actually go away. It's like watching that Obi-Wan show. They can try to make us think he's in danger as if we haven't seen the originals. Also, it's bad. Both Obi-Wan and airlines are bad. Don't watch it, don't fly. Or fly if you have to, but don't watch it. Because ultimately, the government needs airlines. They need people to fly to keep the country running and protect our economy, and also our time-honored tradition of lovesick fools running to the airport to tell our secret crushes not to take that big city job after all, or to tell them, don't get on that plane, it's 9/11. And so that's why, no matter how bad it gets, these major airlines will always have a government bailout waiting for them. And so, along with not fearing any antitrust actions, they don't even really fear losing money, at least not for the people at the top. And honestly, that's kind of the government's fault more than the airlines. Allow me to explain.
This morning, big trouble in the skies. The airline industry taking a devastating hit over coronavirus fears.
Who knows? Half the people in here could be breathing it in. You don't know.
Many airports across the country, ghost towns. Planes littered with empty seats after travelers ground their trips.
Oh yeah! Remember coronavirus? So retro. Glad that's totally over with. And for the airlines, it was yet another devastating impact on their business. In early 2020, passenger travel dropped 96 gosh darn %. And so once more, the airlines got a bailout in the form of $100 billion over several administrations. Because again, this isn't political. This bailout wasn't the exclusive dealings of Mr. Kofefi McSteel's documents or Brandon also steals documents. And remember, that's $100 billion in taxpayer money. And so at this point, you'd like to think that someone in the government would be asking one simple question. What are we getting in return? Thanks to having zero regulatory power, the pandemic was one of the few recent moments in which the government actually had the upper hand on airlines, right? They were taking a nosedive and desperately needed rescue. And as anyone who has played the card game Munchkin can tell you, rescue doesn't come cheap. The government could have, in this moment, asked for things from the airlines. And in fact, some people asked Congress to float the idea of setting emission standards or limiting bag fees, or at the very least, they could have given the bailout in the form of a loan, like at least one think tank speculated at the time. To quote the Brookings Institution, a decade of multi-billion-dollar profits proves the airlines and shippers can pay back loans. Wild theory that they can pay the loans back with all their much money. Glad we have think tanks on the case. But we didn't do any of that. Unlike striking union members, I guess, our government absolutely caters to large corporations. We just gave them the free money under the promise that they would use that money to pay their employees. And then what happened, you ask, excitedly? Well, they still laid off all their employees, of course. Huzzah! And in fact, used some of that bailout money as severance specifically to force people into early retirement. And so now the airlines had very few employees, and Congress was asking what the f*** just happened, like they're Charlie Brown whiffing a football. And can you guess what happened after that? You know, when we decided that COVID was over and everyone started flying again.
Delta, United, and American have struggled since Memorial Day. More than 3,000 total cancellations just since Sunday morning. Walking information picket lines at 7 airports nationwide today, off-duty Delta pilots in contract talks who say they're working excessive overtime as the airline tries to fly its schedule without enough pilots.
I'm surprised. What a surprise. Airlines suddenly didn't have enough employees to handle the influx and had to cancel a bunch of flights. Like they fired everyone after being given money specifically to not fire those people. Those staffing shortages will continue well into this year, by the way. And while the airlines claimed that the money they got only covered 77% of their labor costs, they still somehow managed to give massive bonuses and cash rewards to their executives. Thank goodness for that. And so you see how perpetually f***ed this dynamic is. The airline industry is basically like a shitty roommate who keeps needing their rent covered, but also keeps buying collectible hookahs and adopting dogs. And it all kind of goes back to that initial moment with Carter and Reagan, and the deregulation and air traffic controller firings. And those brief few years where we signaled to the airlines that we were opening the door for them to put their profits over employees or customers. And again, this isn't one political party causing the problem. Unless America only has one political party whose main goal is to protect capital at all costs. But either way, in a bipartisan fashion, it's just the way we decided to do it. We've given the airlines so much power that it's nearly impossible to make any effort to regulate them at this point. Biden, despite being just so sleepy, did announce new rules designed to mitigate drip pricing. It would eliminate hidden fees and basically force airlines to disclose their full ticket price up front. He and Mr. Pete are also making it easier for people to get refunds for things like flight delays by adding strict definitions to what a delay or cancellation actually is. Something that was apparently left up to the airlines before now. Like, airlines could just decide that postponing a flight several hours wasn't a delay and not refund your ticket because of it. Because, holy shit, we really let them do whatever they want. So darn and come. Where does that leave us? This is normally the point of the video where we offer solutions to the problem. Most likely, we'd point to some obvious policy that has been inexplicably branded as socialist and really socialist, or some malarkey like that. But in this case, it's a bit more nuanced and probably requires a lot of moving pieces or several possible solutions. For example, we could sure use better train travel in this country. Not just for the environment, but perhaps as a way to actually give the airlines competition. People wouldn't have to fly from LA to San Francisco, or from Chicago to New York, or from Dallas to Denver when a more comfortable, affordable, and only slightly longer option exists. And in Europe and parts of Asia, we're actually seeing airlines work to compete with these nearly equal travel options. So, what's the deal there? Hey Amtrak, can you get on this or what?
You might notice if you try to book a ticket on one of these trains, they are expensive.
Even with high ticket prices in stations like this one, Amtrak has never made money.
Amtrak doesn't own most of the 21,000 miles of tracks it uses. Freight lines do, so passenger trains often have to pull onto sidings to wait. The result, lengthy delays. And last year, a 4.5% decline in ridership on those longer routes.
Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry I bothered you. I can see you're dealing with some stuff. Yeah, so train travel is kind of its own separate video, summed up by saying that it's all busted up. At first glance, Amtrak seems to have the exact problem airlines used to have, minus the luxury. It's highly regulated and in fact is a state-owned company, and the ticket prices are actually more expensive than flying. Incidentally, this is why I don't necessarily think having a state-owned airline is the answer either. Other countries do have those, but they seem to have all the same problems as any other airline because they are still expected to make a profit. That isn't to say we shouldn't try that, but ultimately we could probably achieve the same goal by simply regulating the airlines we have a bit more. Regulations, a push toward train travel, and therefore investing in rail infrastructure and so on. Also, maybe let's stop taking money from billionaires who want to make pointless neon car tunnels under our cities, you know? Ultimately, the solution isn't very extreme with 3 X's. It's not favoring one side of a political debate, which might be why we haven't really found a solution, but there absolutely is a spectrum here in terms of how we, the consumers, are expected to feel about air travel. As a wise old man once said, well, not wise, actually. I guess just an old man once said, he's kind of a sex creep too. An old sex creep once said, "What's the deal with air travel?" or something like that. I don't think he actually said that. But he has done stand-up about the inconveniences of airlines in the 1990s. But then another old, different kind of sex creep, decades later, defended air travel by pointing out that it's a modern miracle, and it used to take months to journey across the country. So, which sex creep is right? I mean, about air travel specifically, and not the other things they did. I'm not entirely sure why I'm bringing these sex creeps into the conversation, but they do, I guess, represent opposite philosophies on airlines specifically. Should we be happy with what we get in exchange for the ability to fly like a bird for relatively low prices? Or do we, the consumer, deserve the ability to fly affordably without it also being a major hassle? Similarly, do we completely deregulate the airlines, or, considering all the taxpayer money we've given them, do we take them over? My dear watchers and or listeners, I'm sorry to tell you that the answer might just be... Piss! Could have used a fucking warning before you did that. See, the beautiful but tragic thing about this airline problem is that it affects everyone. It affects your liberal cousin and conservative uncle, because airlines just don't care who you are. They will screw you either way. It's one of the few things that brings us together in this country, and the people in the government perpetuating the problem are from both political parties. And even more so, the solution also doesn't really require you to subscribe to one side, because ultimately, deregulation is somehow both the problem and solution? To quote an article by Alfred Kahn, the economist who happens to be the former chairman of CAB, these problems drive home the lesson that the dismantling of comprehensive regulation should not be understood as synonymous with total government laissez-faire. The principal failures over the last 15 years have been failures on the part of government to vigorously and imaginatively fulfill responsibilities that we, in deregulating the industry, never intended to abdicate. His name is Khan, like the guy in Star Trek. Did you notice that? I'll wait. Notice it. Okay. And what Alfred is saying in this article is basically that while deregulation of the airlines has been an overall success, it was never supposed to be a total retreat from our government. He basically points out all the same problems we have in this video and identifies that the current situation is dire, saying the continuing reconcentration of the industry threatens to extend that exploitation to an increasing proportion of the flying public in the future. He then concludes that the government could actively attempt to make markets more competitive by assuming responsibilities that it has neglected. It could vigorously enforce the antitrust laws. It could also remove barriers to competition by expanding airport capacity enough to allow new competitors to operate on routes, by dissolving preferential arrangements between hub-dominating carriers and their hub airports, and above all, by allowing foreign airlines to compete for domestic traffic, either directly or by investing in American carriers. And, yeah, sure. Con seems right. The ultimate answer, for right now at least, is that we just kind of need the government to, like, do their fucking job, you know? That's it. Just fucking do your fucking goddamn motherfucking job. Just because they deregulated the airlines doesn't mean they are absolved from protecting the consumer from anything those airlines decide to do. Just like how a plane captain's responsibility to their passengers doesn't end when the flight ends, but extends to when the plane lands on a remote island filled with dangerous militias, apparently. Seems like the pilot didn't have to personally deal with that situation, but what do I know? Alright, I'm not a pilot. Yet. Getting lessons. Anyway, Plane, starring Gerard Butler. Everyone's talking about it. I'm Gerard Butler in Plane. He does the voice of the plane. I'm Gerard Butler. I don't know how he talks. Get off my plane! That's Gerard Butler in The Mummy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe the video and to the channel. We've got a podcast called Even More News. We have a patreon.com/somemorenews. We have this show, Some More News, as a podcast. If you prefer to hear my impression of Gerard Butler in The Mummy instead of see it. And we got merch, you know, with the puppet character on stuff. And we have love and admiration for all of God's creatures.
Hi. Before you skip this ad, take a moment to hear me out. But first, let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you find blue-haired left-wingers on college campuses who oftentimes cry about social justice as insufferable as I do? Do you believe that them using their free speech rights to speak out against speech that they deem harmful or hateful is actually an attack on free speech itself? And do you believe that trickle-down economics isn't complete and utter horseshit? No? Well, it looks like you're missing out on a lucrative opportunity, my friend. Now I know what you're thinking. SJWs, right-wing economics, how are these two things related? Well, allow me to break it down for you. You see, I'm a right-wing YouTuber myself, named Rave Dubin, and I used to be progressive. But I realized that being a left-wing political commentator wasn't necessarily yielding the financial payoff that I had hoped for or thought that I deserved. So I did what any business-minded individual in my predicament would do. I decided to team up with Koch-funded right-wing organizations like Learn Liberty or PragerU in order to get paid to peddle propaganda and spread harmful misinformation in order to do two very important things. 1, boost my public profile, and 2, make fuckloads of sweet, sweet cash. Now, since PragerU is about educating people, we do have a U in our name after all, I'm going to teach you how to do what I do so you too can turn a profit. And really, there's a plethora of ways that you can go about doing this. Me personally, see, I have a show where I bring on white supremacists and even proto-fascists. And I do all of this under the guise of exploring the marketplace of ideas. And when I'm inevitably then called out by the left for doing this and irresponsibly platforming people who are pretty much Nazis, that's when the real money starts rolling in, because then what I do is play the victim and construct a narrative that it's actually the left's goal to censor me. I build my case against the big bad SJW boogeyman and denounce their criticism as just more outrage from the left. And this is what a lot of right-wingers like myself do on YouTube, because as I simultaneously build the case as to why I'm really the one who's the victim here, I get all of my right-wing viewers to rally around me and support me and send me money and buy my merchandise or brain pills or whatever bullshit I'm trying to hawk at that moment. You see, it may not necessarily seem like SJWs are the biggest threat to the country or even free speech, but that doesn't matter. The SJW narrative is crucial to our cause, and when I say cause, I mean goal of making money, and it would behoove you to learn how to execute this strategy yourself if you'd also like to profit. So here's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to identify a fairly straightforward example of a left-winger behaving badly and extrapolate from that, meaning show your friends or viewers how unreasonable and authoritarian students on college campuses have become and tie their outrage to broader cultural issues. Explain how this is just a microcosm of a bigger issue that's plaguing society in general. Their hypersensitivity to any and everything that they deem unjust or racist or misogynistic is actually putting all of us on a path directly towards full-blown authoritarianism, where suddenly we're all going to be silenced for daring to speak up about things that our peers may or may not deem offensive. Be sure to also catastrophize and throw out extreme hypothetical questions like, will free speech be banned in order to accommodate hypersensitive snowflakes that don't want their feelings hurt? I know, it sounds fucking dumb, but just roll with it because people will believe it. Trust me, I've been doing this for years now. Now, as you're building the case against left-wing authoritarians, make sure you avoid talking about the relative social authoritarians that we have on our side. Because yes, it's true, we do technically have snowflakes on the right as well, who do exist and frequently get triggered by desecration of the American flag, kneeling during the national anthem, being openly blasphemous towards our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, or criticizing Daddy Trump. Now, you don't have to bring these things up to appear fair or neutral, because remember, we're trying to convince them that the left, and only the left, is the problem. Not necessarily because it's true, but because it's just our initial sales pitch. You see, once we hook people with our anti-SJW opener, we then expose them to more complex ideas related to SJWs and perhaps bring up how feminism is cancer and just so happens to be tied to SJW movements on college campuses, or how crazy it is that transgender people have become the pronoun police and they definitely want to lock you or me in jail if we happen to misgender them. Now for this, I refer to my friend Jordan Peterson whenever this issue comes up because he is extremely knowledgeable about this particular subject. And we complete the shit sandwich by sprinkling in some white supremacy. Get them to think that racism no longer is an issue and that it's actually the white people who are the victims of racism. Oh yeah, bring up how the supposed link between race and IQ definitely exists, because I promise you, if you throw in words like biology and science, it adds a more intellectual veneer to your argument and makes you sound way smarter and more persuasive as a result. Now, once you've gotten them to see the light on these key social issues, or at least influence them to be open to hearing more about your argument and worldview, you can then introduce them to right-wing YouTubers such as myself, who will continue to scratch that anti-SJW itch. Remember, we just need you to make the initial sales pitch, and then right-wing propagandists such as myself, Steven Crowder, Stefan Molyneux, or Ben Shapiro will close the sale. And once they start watching those guys and see how easily college students can be destroyed by media-trained propagandists on issues related to social justice, they finally begin to realize that these influencers, people like myself, must also be right about other issues too. Perhaps economic theories like trickle-down or deregulation are also correct. Maybe climate change is real, but perhaps humans aren't the ones causing it. You see, we're not really making any definitive statements here. We're just asking questions. Now, I'm going to be completely honest here. At PragerU, we don't actually give a flying fuck about SJWs on college campuses. We just use them as bait in hopes that unsuspecting dipshits bite it, and once they do, we reel them in and get them to support a political party and economic system that's wholly against their own self-interest. Now, I should mention that we do have to stay firmly committed to this idea that we hate any and all identity politics, but if you're gay, if you're black, or a woman, we'd actually really like to hire you especially, because you guys get to say all the fucked up shit about your community that others can't. For example, I get a nice bonus every time I bring up my husband, and then subsequently give one of my right-wing colleagues permission to call me a faggot. Now, I know what you're going to say. Doesn't all of this seem immoral? To be this divisive and intentionally sow discord socially in order to keep the peasants fighting, while people like me rob them blindly and legitimize an exploitative and unjust system? Well, sure. And I'll admit, sometimes I do feel bad about it. But then I remind myself that it's nothing personal, it's just business. You see, we live in a capitalist system, and I'm just simply greasing the wheels. I'm riding the wave of capitalism until it inevitably consumes itself and brings down the entire fucking planet in the process. And what I'm doing now is using the money I'm making to buy one of those lifeboats that other rich people will probably have once the planet inevitably becomes uninhabitable. And I'm gonna then watch peasants fight over crumbs and kill each other from a safe distance. See, I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'm looking out for my future and your future as well. In fact, all of us are at PragerU. It's about survival. Now, of course, I never say any of this out loud, and publicly I'll continue to identify as a centrist or technically left-wing because that helps us to cultivate a little bit more trust among viewers. And you should do the same. So join the cause. Get educated by PragerU, because we're definitely a real university after all, because you learned something by watching this, didn't you? Dumb motherfuckers.
Is the Earth flat or round? It's round. Okay, now let's see. How do we go about proving that?
That's a hard thing for me to even start talking about because there are so many proofs that the Earth is round, it's difficult to know where to start.
B.O.B., the rapper, I have a video letter to him, the transcript of which is in Letters from an Astrophysicist. That rose to that level of attention because he started saying, I am using laws of math and physics to show Earth is flat. Those are fighting words. You're going to say using math and physics? That is an alarm to the geekiverse that we must rise up and counteract these forces from the dark side that are out there.
There are proofs all around you. It is not difficult to know that the Earth is round. So let's start from the simple to the slightly more complicated. One of the things you can see yourself with a pair of binoculars is if you actually go out to a lake and there are boats on that lake, the farther away a boat is, the more the bottom of the boat will disappear, and you'll basically just see the mast of the boat. And as a boat goes farther and farther away, the last thing you will see is the very top of the mast of that boat. And that's because the boat is actually going over the horizon that's curved. And that means that as it goes farther and farther away, you see less and less of the bottom of it and more of the top of that. You can see that with binoculars, by an ocean, by a lake. It's really easy. That wouldn't happen if the Earth were flat. You would simply see the boat getting smaller and smaller and smaller as it went farther away, but you'd be able to see the whole thing with the same proportions.
Go to the seashore. Go to a seashore and figure out why you can't, if you live on the East Coast, figure out why you can't see Spain from the East Coast of North America. Just go to the middle of the Mississippi River and look south. Why can't you see the Louisiana? Why can't you see New Orleans? What's the problem there? Or then climb a tower, or go to the top of a hill or a mountain, and you'll see a little farther, but you will not see to the other side of the Earth, places we know to exist. For example, I've been to London. I can tell you, other people have. I've been to Vancouver, British Columbia.
I'm in South
And you
Africa
cannot
and
see
I
Vancouver,
lived in
British Columbia
Denmark.
from Boise, Idaho, let alone from New York City or Toronto or what have you.
Then there are some other proofs that are a little more obscure, but they're actually really lovely. And one is to observe what happens during a lunar eclipse. Now, a lunar eclipse happens when the Earth casts a shadow on the moon. The moon actually goes dark. In fact, if you've seen one, you can actually see the Earth's shadow go across the moon. And when the moon is entirely in the Earth's shadow, the moon looks kind of dark and even kind of red colored. It's really, really beautiful. What's happening in that case is that the sun is on one side of the Earth. The Earth is in the middle, and it's casting a shadow. The Earth is casting a shadow on the moon. And as the shadow moves across the moon, you'll notice that the shadow is curved, it's round. So something like the sun that's bigger than the Earth and is able to cast a shadow of the Earth on the moon can actually show you the shape of the Earth. Aha, you might say, but could the Earth be a disk? Could it be flat, but it's actually still shaped like a disk, not like a sphere? There was a Greek scientist called Aristarchus, and what he noticed was that you can get a lunar eclipse at many different angles where the sun is. Sometimes the shadow goes straight across the moon. Sometimes it just kind of glances the moon. Just a little bit is in shadow, just on the top or on the bottom. From every different vantage point, every different angle that the sun is casting a shadow, you always get a perfectly curved shadow. The only shape that can cast a shadow that's curved from any direction you put the light is a sphere. So people have known that the Earth is spherical for thousands of years.
Look at pictures from space where you see the Earth as a sphere. Those pictures are not faked, and I'll tell you just, if nothing else, here's why you can tell they're not faked. Just to create the paperwork that NASA has created, for NASA in this one case, just the paperwork to send anything out in space, to send people into orbit or to send them to the moon, that amount of paperwork would make faking it prohibitively expensive. No one could afford to generate that much documentation. Then the other thing, if you want to get into this, if you're really serious, if your friends are really serious, have them get on a boat or a ship and go out at sea, and you'll notice you can't see infinitely far. Furthermore, if you get into it enough, pick up a book about navigation or go online and learn about navigation. A very, very important thing you have to take into account when you try to navigate the ocean from a ship or a boat is how high you are off the sea surface. The higher you are off the sea surface, the farther you can see, the farther away the horizon is.
I actually said this to somebody, and I couldn't believe they'd never thought of it, that, you know, with binoculars you can see planets. You can see Saturn and Jupiter. You can see Mars with a telescope, the sun, the moon. Everything else you see in the solar system is a sphere. So we're the one thing that is different. You know, and that actually made somebody who was more interested in actually hearing information, that actually got them to think. They were like, you're right. You know, everything else we take a picture of is a sphere.
And you guys, come on. Everybody watches newscasts. You all use mobile phones. You all see airplanes fly around. You all go to see Ed Sheeran in concert one day in London, another day in Melbourne, Australia. This all depends on our fundamental understanding of the size of the Earth and its shape with extraordinary precision. And if you want to get into it, the Earth isn't quite a sphere. It's a little bleh. Its spin is a little bleh. Stretched it, made it slightly oblate, as the saying goes.
And it's not okay to think that the Earth is flat. This is not a viable argument. I have friends who have been on the International Space Station. They have orbited the Earth once every 90 minutes. You know, I have had personal experience with people that have been up in space and can see with their own eyes that the Earth is round. And of course, we've taken all these amazing pictures from space. They're so beautiful, all those pictures of the Earth. So I don't really know what's going on right now with this Earth is flat thing.
In a debate, what is the construct? It's typically two people, and there's an audience, and you debate some opposite sides of some issue, and then there's a winner of the debate. And then everyone walks away reflecting on the winner. So who wins a debate? It's often the person who's charismatic, who's maybe charming, that's related to charisma, of course, who has a good way with words, good vocabulary. And you can have someone who doesn't have any of that, who is speaking objective truths, who could lose a debate. So then what is the point of the debate if one of these points of view is objectively true? So I will not enter a debate where I have the objectively true side of an argument and the other person does not. That is something that should not be debated, does not belong in front of an audience getting debated. You want to debate something? Debate political policy of what to do in the face of climate change. Do you have carbon tax? Do you solar panels, do you subsidize them? Debate that. Don't debate something that is or is not objectively true in this world.
This is all susceptible to analysis, but spend some time learning about navigation. Tell your friends to spend some time learning about navigation. Navigation's changed the world, by the way. What are you wearing? You're wearing stuff that came from another part of the world on a ship. It didn't get here by magic. It got here through science.
If you believe in magic, you can believe in anything without
they're
proof.
using math, science, evidence, and physics behind their cause, when in fact they either aren't or they're using it badly. That needs to be called out. Otherwise, if you just have a belief system, I don't really care. We live in a country that protects free speech, which usually also means free thought. If you want to think the Earth is flat, go right ahead. But if you start influencing other people who have power over other people, and you have no foundation in objective reality, it can be dangerous. If you influence people, or you yourself become someone who has influence over legislation, laws, rules by which we all abide in society, that's an unhealthy situation for civilization to be in. If your personal belief system, which does not have correspondence in objective reality, starts becoming predominant in the thoughts and hearts and minds of civilization.
It's not okay to say that the Earth is flat. This is some sort of strange denial. I don't know where it comes from. And it's something where I keep getting this question. We really need to put this question to bed, because we've known the Earth is a sphere for a long time.
Get smarter faster with new videos every week from the world's biggest thinkers.
The holiday season at the end of 2022 was nothing but controversy for the Cameron family. The Cameron family, known for Candace and Kirk Cameron, former child and teen TV stars of the 80s and 90s. You may remember Candace Cameron as DJ on Full House, who then grew up to become a Christian Christmas Hallmark-style romance movies star, I guess? And got into controversy, which I covered at the end of 2022, about how she wanted to be in movies about traditional marriage, with traditional relationships, where there weren't going to be gays or the LGBTQ community, like how the Hallmark Channel was going to do one same-gender romance, and that was just too much for her. So she was like, nope, I'm moving away. I'm moving away to the Great American Family Network. We covered that entire thing. Now, what some of you guys may or may not know is that Candace Cameron's older brother, Kirk Cameron, was also a TV star around this time, playing the character Mike on the show Growing Pains. Kirk Cameron then became somewhat of a meme as he grew up and delved deeper and deeper down the Christian fundamentalist rabbit hole, creating amazing cinematic gems like Kirk Cameron's Saving Christmas, a movie about why the Christ needs to go back into Christmas, which ends with a fantastic hip-hop rendition of Hark the Herald Angels Sing, where his entire family breaks out into a synchronized choreographed dance. I'm not kidding, it's great. But at the end of 2022 was old news for close to a decade by that point. Instead, Kirk Cameron got himself back in the news because he had released a new book called As You Grow, a book about a tree that is growing and a child that is growing and animals. The plot made no sense, to be honest, and I am going to be reviewing that particular book this Friday on this channel with my friend Reads with Rachel. The two of us got together and decided to review this book together, so stay tuned for that video because it's going to be fun. But basically, he wrote that book, and a lot of libraries were like, Kirk Cameron, we don't really want to host you for library story time because you're annoying and your book sucks.
You're tacky and I hate you.
And Kirk Cameron was like,
okay, you see me after class.
This is the woke leftist liberal agenda. They will let people read their LGBTQ books at the library. They will let them read these books about gender and all this stuff.
What is this nonsense?
but they won't let me read my book about a tree and a child and some animals and the tree's getting bigger and the tree is a metaphor or maybe not really. They won't let me read my book about a tree that makes no sense. That's correct. So when I was looking into this entire controversy to first do research on a video about Kirk Cameron, what I discovered beneath it was so much deeper and so much bigger than I ever could have possibly imagined. The publishing company that produced Kirk Cameron's book is a book called Brave Books, or Brave Publishing Company. And this company does not just produce books by people like Kirk Cameron, but they are an entire publishing company that produces exclusively children's books written by right-wing conspiracy theorists. I'm not even kidding. So today we're going to do a deep dive into Brave Publishing Company, talk all about some of their best-selling books, look at some of the incredible topics they're covering for kids. I don't even know what to say. This is going to be hilarious. Get ready, let's go.
Get you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should pick up lesbianism.
Chicago. You guys asked for it.
What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy, and welcome back to Savvy Writes Books, the channel where we talk about books and business, where today we're talking about a business that produces books, and we're talking about children's books in particular, which is one of my areas of expertise. If you don't know, I am the author of 6 picture books about rescue dogs and cats and their journeys to adoption, which is all under my own small business, Forever Home Friends, which is linked in the description below. That business publishes books and produces stuffed animals about real rescue animals getting adopted, and donates 10% of our profits to local animal shelters here in Chicago. So if you're interested in any of those type of things, you can check that out linked in the description below. Writing for a younger audience is something that a lot of people go into thinking is easy, but is actually more often than not a greater challenge than you might realize, because not only are you having to break down concepts in a way that someone's developing mind can understand, and not only do you have a limited vocabulary to do that with, but you also have to do so in a way that gives the main character agency, that keeps the reader engaged throughout the entire story. There's a lot of things to keep in mind when writing for children. But I think a lot of celebrities hear children's book, picture book, and think, oh, that's not that many words. I can do that. That's very short. It's short, but it's still a challenge. And when a lot of people who already have a platform don't take that challenge seriously, we end up with absolutely shit books like this that nobody should read to their children. For me, the challenge of writing for children was definitely something that I feel like I gained a lot of experience from during my time working, teaching creative writing to kids, which I did for about 3 years, and just generally the times I've worked, you know, coaching kids in writing, tutoring kids.
She was like, I'm a pusher, Katie. I'm a pusher.
Working as a teacher in summer programs and things like that. All of that kind of gave me a lot of experience for this, and I don't think that my writing is perfect by any means, but I do really enjoy getting to critique writing for children and critique the things that kids might not necessarily understand and draw comparisons to how I might have approached that differently in my writing process. There's a lot to unpack about this publishing company, Brave Books, and the ways that it is indoctrinating our children. So let's get into it. What is Brave Books?
No. Who do you think you...
This is Brave Books. Finally! Children's books you can trust. Morality is ingrained in our children by the age of 10. Leave a lasting legacy by instilling pro-God and timeless values to your kids or grandkids.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
So I have no issue with families that want to have a religious angle to how they raise their kids. That's absolutely fine, and I think religious freedom is extremely important, and everyone should be able to do everything however they see fit for their own family. But one thing I hear a lot on the side of some of the type of people we're going to see who have written these books, you know, the Kirk Camerons, the Steven Crowders. Yes, Steven Crowder has a book published by this company that we are going to also be reviewing on this channel. People like them and people like some of the other authors we're going to look at, a lot of these people are known for going on their soapbox and saying, the leftists are indoctrinating our children, they are grooming our children to think that same-sex marriage is okay, things like this. Anytime that someone teaches something to children that isn't necessarily a thing that they agree with, but is something that does happen in the world, they accuse people of grooming and indoctrinating. And I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with giving your child a religious education if that's what you think is best for your family. But I think it is extremely hypocritical to claim that other people are indoctrinating your children, but when you come along and say, hey, I'm going to teach my children exclusively these values, suddenly that's not indoctrination. That's fine because you agree with it and you said it's okay.
Hypocrite!
It's like, rules for me, not for thee. It's extremely hypocritical. I don't like it at all.
God.
But let's take a look at some of these books and see what they're all about. There are a whole bunch of books in this universe of the Brave Books cinematic universe. There's a lot of books in there, and there's a lot of very interesting and controversial authors, and I think we're going to play a little game when we look at the title of some of these books and say, what do you think this book's about? We're going to take bets in the comments, and then I'll reveal it. Okay. So most of the books in the Brave Books universe take place in this area called Freedom Island, where good battles evil and truth prevails. So this is Freedom Island over here. I believe Freedom Island is meant to represent the US. Above Freedom Island, just north of it, we have this place called Utopia. And there's a book about Utopia called The Island of Free Ice Cream, because Utopia is kind of a tongue-in-cheek name for it. They don't really believe it's a true utopia. Utopia wants to be a utopia, but in reality, they just give out free ice cream and it falls apart and it doesn't work. And I think that's kind of supposed to be how, like, just north of us in the US, we have Canada, and they give out free healthcare. They pretend to be a utopia. I think that might be what it's getting at here, although I'm not sure, and I'm not sure kids are going to necessarily pick up on it. But anyway, this is Freedom Island, which is the universe that all of these books take place in. Explore Freedom Island, a captivating world, lovable characters, engaging illustrations, and memorable stories. I will say one of these is true, and that's that they do have engaging illustrations. The art is well done in these books. I always wonder what it must be like to be an artist who's hired to do the art for a book that sucks. Like, you do really good art, your work looks beautiful, you're probably proud of your work, but, like, do you really want people to read the book? I don't know, it depends who they hired.
Why did you hire me?
I like how they talk about instilling timeless values, but one of those timeless values is clearly not graphic design, because they could not figure out how to put the text on top of Freedom Island in a way where this text wouldn't perpendicularly run through this text and jumble it all up. But I believe what it says is love of God and country, honesty, bravery, and kindness, perseverance, self-control, and more. It does the same thing over here. What is this? Build. I couldn't even read that word at first because they have the white text on top of the white part of the map. Clearly, capitalism isn't working that well in your favor if you can't even afford to hire a good graphic designer for your website. So let's take a look at some of the bestsellers on Freedom Island. As You Grow is Kirk Cameron's book that we're going to talk about on Friday. We're going to review that one in full. One of them that we're going to look at first is Little Lives Matter. So do we think that Little Lives Matter, let's take bets on the first book, do we think it is a book that is diminishing the quality of the Black Lives Matter movement? Or do we think it is a book about why we shouldn't have abortions because all lives matter even if they're tiny? Tiny as in not even birthed yet. Which of those do you think the book is about? Let me know in the comments, and then we'll take a look at the book in a second.
Planet Express shareholders, cast your votes.
You know what? You've had enough time. Leave your comment. We're going to look at it now. Little Lives Matter. What is Little Lives Matter about? Can you give me a description anywhere? Where's the description of Little Lives Matter? Product description. Where's the summary of the book? Do I have to, like, Google this separately? Are you not going to tell me what your book's about on your own website? What is the story of... I'm dying to know. I'm dying to know.
Tell me, what is it?
I like how you can buy it signed or unsigned. Every time I read this, I don't know what it is, but my brain just reads this as, do you want it hinged or unhinged? Do you want the unhinged copy of the book? Alright, let me look up Little Lives Matter book summary. I guess we have to go to Amazon to find out what it's about, so clearly you didn't do a good enough job on your own website. Great job. Brave Books and Elizabeth Johnston have partnered together to tackle the topic of sanctity of life in our story Little Lives Matter. Alright, so whoever said in the comments below that it was about abortion, you win! Yay! Good job! Which tells the story of Mama Bear and her beloved son Moby. Moby is born with only one front paw, which makes motherhood and Moby's development even difficult than it would have been. However, Mama Bear won't give up on Moby, even when Culture the Vulture! So, we have now been introduced to the recurring villain of the Freedom Island universe, which is Culture the Vulture. Culture is the villainous animal who is trying to direct our noble main characters away from serving God and country because he wants to instill them with cultural values, which is, from what I learned from Girl Defined and reading Girl Defined's book and reviewing that last year, I learned that when people say culture, that's a Christian dog whistle for anything that is outside of Christian values.
Why are you white?
Anything outside of that, anything that is cultural, that includes things like cultural femininity, which means things like wearing too much makeup and dressing like a slut, that's cultural femininity.
That was
You
even
should
too
be
much
modest,
for my
that's biblical
PC for a
femininity.
moment.
They talk about it too with, like, you know, this cultural indoctrination makes us think that gay marriage is okay, as opposed to biblical marriage, which is one man and one woman and pumping out babies like a cannon. We'll get back to the canon
And
in a second,
ruining
because
wedding
the canon is a
cakes.
thing in these books too, okay? Get ready. So Culture the Vulture is the radical left. So that's the entire plot. This book sounds really fucking stupid, so we're not going to go into it more than that because there's funnier shit to cover. Next book, Elephants Are Not Birds. Alright guys, elephants are not birds.
Boys are not girls.
Let's take bets in the comments below. Do you think Elephants Are Not Birds is A, an anti-transgender book about how what you are is
Or
determined by what you're
anti-evolution.
born as and you can
All of
never
the
change
above.
to anything else? That's option 1. Or option 2, do we think Elephants Are Not Birds is a book about anti-evolution and why an animal can't be another animal, because
really
obviously we
could go
can't
either
share
way,
a common
couldn't
ancestor.
it?
Animals are different and were created uniquely by God. It could be either of those, like, believably. What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below right now.
Sadly,
Place your
yes.
bets. Alright, now let's find out what the book's about. Here we go. Brave Books and Ashley St. Clair have partnered together to tackle the intense topic of
Told you.
gender identity! Alright, who said it was an anti-trans book? Collect your winnings. Your winnings are the fact that you get to say you were right. Yay! Good job. This book teaches children that boys are not girls and elephants are not birds. Sounds fascinating. Truly, I'm sure a kid is gonna love to listen to a story where the entire thing is an extended metaphor for something they probably don't fully understand. And now I'm gonna get someone in my comments being like, did you just admit that kids don't understand gender? No. What I'm saying is that kids have a sense of self-recognition and can understand what they are, but the concepts of, like, something being a metaphor for something else throughout an entire book is often something that's a little above kids' heads. Kids need something a little more direct. And
How
yes,
do
you
we
can have
know
a
who
character
they are
that's an animal,
before
like, go
they
through
do
something
it?
that a human might go through and draw that connection and
They
scaffold
don't.
that so the kid can understand. Like, for example, when I write Forever Home Friends stories, I write them from a dog or a cat's perspective, but then it's very clear to say things like,
will.
okay, this is what the cat is going through. He uses his creativity to solve a problem. How can you use your creativity to solve a problem? It's like the animal is still actually doing the same thing the kid would be doing, like using creativity to solve a problem. Elephants are not birds. Boys are not. How is that going to make any sense to anyone? Anyway,
Someone
let's
should
move
tell
on to my
Dumbo.
favorite book in this series. Who's ready for Paws Off My Cannon? It is time for Paws Off My Cannon. All right. Do we think that Paws Off My Cannon is
Gun
a
control?
book about anti-gun control and why everyone should be allowed to own whatever weapons
Or
they please
abuse.
and the government should have no say in that? Or do we think it is a book against premarital sex? Paws Off My Cannon. Which do you think it is? Let me know in the comments below. Take your bets. I love how all these titles could be like multiple different Christian things. Are we ready for this?
Could be
Paws
anyone.
Off My Cannon. The importance of the Second Amendment through the story Paws Off My Cannon. Alright, anyone who said it was a book about guns, you win. But of course, because the product description doesn't give the full plot synopsis, because this website is absolute shit, we have to go to Amazon to look at what the book's actually about. In Book 6 of Saga 1, even the organization and ordering of these books is extremely complex. Oh my god. Brave Books and Dana Loesch, I'm not actually sure who that is, have joined forces to discuss the importance of the Second Amendment through the story Paws Off My Cannon. This story follows Bongo, a daring and hungry gorilla who loves eating food, especially mushroom-shaped cupcakes. Introducing our kids to mushroom baked goods early. That's cool, good job. But one day, a villainous hyena shoots a coconut at Bongo and his friend Bonnie. Bonnie is so upset at this misuse of coconut cannons. Oh, Donkey Kong right now.
Donkey Kong sucks.
You know something? You suck.
Bonnie is so upset at this misuse of coconut cannons that she suggests the hyenas are the problem, not the coconut cannons. Their debate splits Mushroom Village, and when the hyenas come back, their views are put to the test. Interesting. Okay, so it seems pretty clear here that the whole idea is someone wants to use their gun for hunting, and then someone else wants to use their gun for violence. I think it is a little weird that they make the characters who use the guns for hunting and the characters who use the guns for violence as two different species. That's a little odd, but I can't get over the title Paws Off My Cannon, so we're gonna end it there. Alright, who's ready for ba-ba-da-ba, Freedom Day the Asher Way? Freedom Day the Asher Way by Dinesh and Debbie D'Souza. Those names sound familiar. Who do we think Dinesh and Debbie D'Souza are? Dinesh Joseph D'Souza is an Indian-American right-wing political commentator, author, filmmaker, and conspiracy theorist. Well, I hope there are no conspiracy theories in Freedom Day the Asher Way. I guess we'll have to wait and find out. He has written over a dozen books. Yeah, and one of them is a children's book about a little fox in a hat. In 2012, D'Souza released the documentary film 2016, Obama's America, an anti-Barack Obama polemic based on his 2010 book, The Roots of Obama's Rage. Interesting. Well, this sounds interesting. D'Souza has promoted several conspiracy theories, such as the false claim that Obama was not born in the United States and the conspiracy theory that the Clintons had murdered people. D'Souza has also promoted false claims about financier George Soros, including that Soros had collaborated with the Nazis as a youth, and that he has sponsored Antifa, a left-wing anti-fascist movement. In August 2016 interview with GQ, D'Souza denied being a conspiracy theorist, stating, "I have never advanced a conspiracy theory in my life." In 2017, D'Souza suggested the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally had been staged. In the same month, he tweeted that it would be interesting to see Soros extradited to Israel and tried for his complicity in Nazi atrocities against Jews, and referred to Soros as Hitler's collection boy. After mail bombing attempts on prominent Democratic politicians occurred in October 2018, D'Souza tweeted, "Fake SA victims, fake refugees, now fake mail bombs." D'Souza argued that the lack of a cancellation mark on the bomb-containing packages was evidence that they were not mailed. Oh wow, he's racist! In November 2013, D'Souza received backlash for referring to Obama as grown-up Trayvon in a tweet. In response to the backlash, D'Souza tweeted, "Feigned outrage on the left over me calling Obama grown-up Trayvon, except that Obama likened himself to Trayvon." In February 2015, D'Souza wrote, "You can take the boy out of the ghetto," in a tweet criticizing Obama for using a selfie stick. After the tweet was criticized as racist, D'Souza tweeted, "I know Obama wasn't actually raised in a ghetto. I'm using the term metaphorically." Okay. In November 2017, D'Souza mocked Beverly Young Nelson, one of the women who accused Roy Moore of SA, and tweeted, "I was lukewarm on Roy Moore until the last-minute smear. Now we must elect him." Jesus! Oh my god, okay. In February 2021, after the January 6th United States Capitol attack took place, D'Souza suggested that the rioters were little more than a bunch of rowdy people walking through a hallway. In May, D'Souza tweeted about the attack, "Does this look like an insurrection?" Alright, and finally, this is the most important thing about D'Souza, as we're about to see what his book is about. On January 23rd, 2014, D'Souza was charged with making $20,000 in illegal campaign contributions to the New York Senate campaign of Wendy Long and causing false statements to be made to the Federal Election Commission. His attorney responded to the charges by saying his client did not act with any corrupt or criminal intent whatsoever. On May 15th, 2014, United States District Judge Richard M.
Wouldn't mute. Apology.
About the attack. Does this look like an insurrection? Alright, and finally, this is the most important thing about D'Souza, as we're about to see what his book is about. On January 23rd, 2014, D'Souza was charged with making $20,000 in illegal campaign contributions to the New York Senate campaign of Wendy Long and causing false statements to be made to the Federal Election Commission. His attorney responded to the charges by saying his client did not act with any corrupt or criminal intent whatsoever. On May 15th, 2014, United States District Judge Richard M. Berman rejected the contention that D'Souza was singled out for prosecution, saying the court concludes the defendant has respectfully submitted no evidence he was selectively prosecuted. On May 20th, 2014, D'Souza pleaded guilty to one felony count of making illegal contributions in the name of others. On September 23rd, 2014, the court sentenced D'Souza to 5 years probation, 8 months in a halfway house, and a $30,000 fine. Is Freedom Day the Asher Way on his list of books published? No, it doesn't. It doesn't look like it. Anyway, so this guy who has been charged with felonies for illegal campaign contributions, is he the one we want to be teaching our kids about how to handle money? What do we think? Let's look at Freedom Day the Asher Way. Asher's sure this will be the best Freedom Day ever, even though he's running low on funds. After all, Asher can just tweak the market and make everything he wants cheaper. Wait, how does Asher tweak the market? I will say, shout out to this book for being the first one to include the summary of the book here on the actual website listing. Also, that's an interesting name, Asher. I like that name. I wonder what the history or the origin of the name Asher is. Let's find out. Asher is a Hebrew name meaning happy and blessed. Huh. A Hebrew name for this fox. Asher can just tweak the market and make everything he wants cheaper. Did Dinesh D'Souza really just write a children's book about a Jewish fox that controls the banks? Did I read that correctly? Is that really what this book is about? What? Okay, so Freedom Day the Asher Way is the tale of a Jewish fox that can tweak the market. What? It's a plan that can't fail, right? Join Asher as he learns that the free market is better for both buyers and sellers, then explore the topic with your family. When you subscribe and save, you can look forward to books on the following topics: overcoming fear, leadership, fake news, border control, and more. What the fuck? The last book we're going to look at from Brave Books is called The Night the Snow Monster Attacked by General Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn. Alright, what did you write, Michael Flynn? The Night the Snow Monster Attacked. I do not want this guy writing to me about wars or battles or anything. I do not want him teaching my children about this. Do I want the unhinged copy of it? Written by the legendary General Michael Flynn. Mr. Mouse is captured, but never fear. Valor, the fearless leader, has a plan. But when the rest of Team Brave begins to overrule Valor's leadership, their mission heads downhill fast. Join Team Brave as they learn what makes a good leader and a good follower. Then explore this topic with your family through the activities in the Brave Challenge. What makes a good leader? Wanting to overturn election results? Wanting to suspend the Constitution and hold a new election under military rule? Is that what makes a good leader? I don't know. That's not who I want leading my kids. I don't have kids, so maybe my opinions don't count. I think when it comes to these books, one of the things that is most frustrating about them is the fact that these books are clearly not written for kids. They're clearly written for parents who want to feel morally superior, for parents who want to feel like they did activism. It's virtue signaling for parents, and I just absolutely hate that. And yeah, we could say that there's books on the left side that do this too, but I think this has been probably the most blatant example of an entire publishing company being devoted to creating books that I just can't see these being interesting to kids at all. From all my time spent teaching kids, like, yeah, maybe they'll connect with the art a little bit, maybe they will find the animal characters kind of interesting, but from everything I've seen here, these plots aren't going to be things that necessarily resonate with kids unless their parents are right there telling them, see, Paws Off My Cannon is really about gun control. See, look at this one. Elephants can't be birds, right? So can boys be girls? What do you think, little Timmy? Like, I just, the plots of these are so beyond what kids are going to understand, because a lot of kids at the age where you're going to be reading them a picture book like this aren't necessarily thinking in terms of figurative language, and they don't, as far as I can see, and from the fact that I have bought 2 of the books to review on this channel, while there are, like, educational things in the back, we'll say, while there are things in the back for, like, ideas of how to connect with your kids about these, there's no discussion of, like, how to teach them what a metaphor is, how to teach them about figurative language, how to teach them about what symbolism means, and it shouldn't necessarily, because when kids are that young, that's not necessarily something that their brain is going to interpret. A lot of kids take things very literally, and a lot of adults too, but these books are written in a way where it's very obviously for the parents to buy them and be like, oh yeah, finally I can teach my kids about these good American values.
It's called Rex Kwando!
But like, unless you're telling the kid directly, this is a representation of America, and blah blah blah, the kid is not going to get that, and the story is going to be a lot more for the parent to feel good about themselves than for the kid's actual entertainment or education at all. And that's partially why I think these books are such a failure. I do think that they're really funny to make fun of on YouTube, though, and I look forward to reviewing some of those books on this channel, so stay tuned for more of that. I will see you guys again later this week for other videos, and don't forget that on Friday I am going to be reviewing Kirk Cameron's book with Reads with Rachel on this channel. We're going to be reviewing that together, so we're having a fantastic, hilarious book discussion about it. And then in the future I am going to review Steven Crowder's book that is from the Brave Books Publishing Company as well, which is one of those boys and girls are inherently different and gender essentialism is important because feminists are stupid or whatever. It's one of those books, so we're gonna review that as well. So stay tuned for all of that stuff because this company is probably the funniest discovery that I've made ever. So I will see you guys then. In the meantime, support small businesses and support small publishing companies that aren't filled with right-wing conspiracy theorists. Bye!
Get you some nuts. There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should pick up lesbianism.
Chicago. You guys asked for it.
The biggest scientific problem for atheists lies in the nature of the universe itself.
Does it now? Please, go on.
The Big Bang is the theory that holds that the universe...
That is by me, so I am going to wait for now. I'll probably be on Monday. I don't know which. Thanks for keeping company. And see you soon.